are the 10 most commonly asked questions people have when they consider investing in Airbnb arbitrage. Now, if you don't know what Airbnb arbitrage is, it's basically finding a good property on the internet, calling the landlord and telling them, hey John, would you be interested in me managing your property? I'll pay you rent plus a little bit more on top and have professional cleaners in your property a couple times a week. So without further ado, let's go over the most commonly asked questions about Airbnb arbitrage. Number one, is the Airbnb market too saturated? The short answer is no. Airbnb CEO recently said in an article that they need 2 million more hosts to be able to meet market demand. So as long as you're running your numbers properly, we're far away from oversaturation. Question number two, why would a landlord let you manage their property on Airbnb when they can just do it themselves? So here's another similar question. Why would your boss hire you if they can just do it themselves? Contrary to popular belief, there's a lot that goes into this Airbnb business. Some people think it's as easy as taking a few pictures, putting on Airbnb, and making a bunch of cash. Now the reality is, if you want to be successful in this business, there's a lot more that goes into it. And most landlords just don't have the time, or else they would have already done it. But if you come in and make this completely passive for them, and you treat their property like your own, and you also pay them a little bit more in rent each month, most landlords are going to take that deal all day long. Airbnb is illegal in my city or state, and also, does this work in Canada? Every single property that I own is over 500 miles away from me. So let's say you live in Canada, or you live in a city where it's illegal and you have $10,000 in capital. Here's step by step what you should do. Number one, find a market where people travel to, or there's some sort of draw like a national park, a cool city, etc. Next, go to AirDNA and see what nearby properties are charging for their property. Number three, once you have a couple of comps, go to Zillow.com for rent and start looking through similar properties that have the same characteristics as the ones that you found. Four, call the landlord, pitch them the business model, and secure the property with the sublease addendum. The fifth thing is pick a cool design for the house and then furnish the property. Number six, set up your boots on the ground team of your cleaners, movers, and handyman so they can help you set up this property completely remote. Seven, once it's all clean and staged, send your professional photographer to take pictures and list it on Airbnb. Now, a lot of people think that if they haven't seen this property, that they wouldn't invest 5 figures into it. But again, I was able to set up all my properties completely remotely without me having to see it until it was completely done. And this was only possible because of my team. Now, when it comes to setting up Airbnbs, you can do this whole process from home while working your full-time job. I mean, that's exactly what I did before I quit. Now, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't thoroughly vet your team and your property. For example, I was looking at a property that I was close to signing the lease on. But after going through inspections, we noticed a leak coming from the roof, and the house needed a new roof after further investigation, but the landlord refused to fix it. So we backed out and didn't sign. You want to make sure that your boots on the ground team goes to the property to verify the property is in good condition and there aren't any major issues. And if you find something and the landlord isn't willing to repair, just move on to the next property. What occupancy rate do you need to be able to cover your mortgage and also make it profitable? So let's say you found a property that's renting for $2,000 a month. Assuming these are your expenses, you would need to find a property that did at least $275 a night at a 68% occupancy rate. And that would give you $2,500 a month in cash flow. And the sweet spot from my experience is to be able to get a 65 to 75% occupancy rate. Now, of course, if your average nightly rate is higher, then you can have a lower occupancy rate and vice versa. How much money can I make from one Airbnb if I invest $10,000? All right, so here's a full breakdown of the $10,000 that you need to get a property up and running. It's gonna cost about $500 to get your LLC set up. I highly recommend getting an AirDNA subscription. That's gonna be another $100. Let's say you find a property for rent for $2,000. You're also gonna have to set aside another $2,000 for the security deposit. Depending on where your property is located, your insurance is gonna be roughly about $100. So while you're getting your property set up, let's call it $150 for your utilities and another $50 for your internet. Your furniture costs are gonna be about $4,000. And then you're gonna pay your handyman $200 to come install your smart locks and also your Ring camera. Another $400 for your mover to set up all the furniture. You're gonna pay a photographer $200 to take professional photos, and then $300 to your cleaners to make sure that everything is set up properly and clean the property so it's ready for rent. Are you renting these properties under an LLC? And is it necessary to get an LLC to start Airbnb arbitrage? The answer is yes. I always do Airbnb arbitrage under an LLC. Once I set that up, you can sign the lease under your business entity. So the LLC is gonna do two things. Number one, it's gonna protect your personal assets from your business assets. And number two, it's gonna make you look more credible to landlords. I mean, think about it. Do you think they would rather do business with a legitimate business or just some random Joe Schmo? From there, you're gonna wanna get an insurance policy through a company like Proper Insurance, which is gonna protect your belongings, including your lost rent in case of an emergency. What if the owner agrees to let you do Airbnb arbitrage, but the HOA doesn't allow it? So this is the reason I avoid HOAs altogether, because you run the risk of them shutting your business down overnight. The only time I'll make an exception is number one, if most of the other properties in the HOA are already short-term rentals. And number two, if most of the board members of the HOA are pro short-term rentals, then I might consider investing in that HOA, but only if it's a screaming deal. How do you address the issue of more and more cities restricting Airbnbs? So here's a couple things that I do to mitigate my risks. The first thing I do is I always have a clause in the lease addendum that states that the city comes down with a regulation that impacts your ability to run your business, then you're allowed to get out of your lease without penalty. And the second option that you have is you can choose an area where there's a hospital, a university, or businesses nearby and convert those to midterm stays. So most cities and counties see anything more than a 30+ day stay as a long-term rental, which 99% of these places don't require a permit to run. You'll be marketing to traveling nurses, business professionals, etc. Now most of the time your upside isn't going to be as high, but this is just another great way to pivot to avoid getting your business completely shut down. Why would someone use Airbnb instead of hotels? So the main pros of choosing an Airbnb over an hotel, number one is that they're cheaper overall for groups that want to stay together. Number two, they can enjoy more privacy and stay in larger places. It's also easier to stay in Airbnbs for longer term stays. Number four, the good hosts are going to actually provide better customer service than most hotels. And number five, you're going to have way more options to choose from. What states and cities are the most underrated for Airbnb arbitrage? Now, Charleston attracts visitors in almost every season. There's a ton of history, like the first shots of the Civil War, and you're no more than a few miles away from beautiful beaches. Next on the list is Columbus, Ohio. The Ohio State University is right at the heart of the city, and there's usually something happening year-round. You can attract business travelers, tourists, and also families visiting their students in college. Next on the list is Key West, Florida. Key West has some of the most beautiful beaches in the entire world. It also has a cool downtown area and a great nightlife. Blue Ridge, Georgia is a quaint little town that's beautiful, especially during the fall months. It's located near the National Forest, it's near the Blue Ridge Scenic Railway, and also attracts a lot of visitors wanting to explore nature and art. The fifth on the list is Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was ranked by Travel and Leisure magazine as a top 3 American city, and there's a lot of great food, there's museums, and also outdoor activities that you can do.